to the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, because this year has been a particularly challenging budget for reasons that I'll talk about today. But sometimes the contribution and the hard work of public officials gets lost in the spirit of political debate. And I think we should acknowledge today the importance and the dedication of all of those officials that are here and all of those that support them in the city and right around the country. Now, this annual address is really my favourite event, if you like, in Budget Week, because it does give the opportunity to tell a far bigger story, a story behind the budget. We're not just talking here about specific numbers or specific measures. They've all been canvassed a hell of a lot in the last 24 hours. Each of my 4 budgets has increased my respect for the 2 Labor treasurers who have delivered more than I have. Ben Shipley rebuilt our economy after the war. And of course, Paul Keating opened it up to the world. Both contributed mightily to the higher standards of living our people enjoy today. Now, I start with this nod to history to make the point that economic management is best judged on its impact on the big things, like positioning us to take advantage of global developments, and to make the point that the shifts we are seeing today and the opportunities for Australia are equal in magnitude to any we've seen before, if not unprecedented in our history. The key to this budget is our resolve as a government to secure for Australians, for this generation and the generations to come, a prosperous future in the changing global economy. Now, my argument today is in 2 parts. First, that the budget story is part of a broader story about mining boom Mark II, which is part of an even broader story about the opportunities for Australia that flow from the middle class of Asia. And my second point, and perhaps most important point, is that our values and the runs that we put on the board during the global financial crisis better position this Labor government to handle the enormous opportunities and challenges posed by the global transition that is now well underway. This budget is different to the 3 that preceded it, but it began very much in the same way. First of all, in discussions with the Prime Minister towards the end of last year, and of course the usual few days at the beach of Maroochydore, scribbling on a pad a few notes and thoughts for the year ahead. But by Christmas of last year, we were on track to fairly comfortably deliver in this budget a surplus for 2012-13, on a path that we had mapped out in last year's mid-year economic and fiscal outlook. When we started our preparations, we knew that we were coming out of the worst global recession in 75 years. A global recession that left around 30 million more people unemployed worldwide, and a recovery that in Europe, Japan and North America was both fragile and patchy. Even today, many advanced economies have barely recovered the ground they lost and are still struggling with the toxic mix of high unemployment, high deficits and high debt. By contrast, emerging economies are recovering strongly. For our part, the swift and vigorous action we took to meet the threat posed by the global financial crisis helped us put us in a position of strength today, with low unemployment, low deficits and low debt. But following those initial discussions at the end of last year and the time on the deck at Maroochydore, we encountered a series of human and economic disasters. The floods that struck Queensland and down the east coast in January were a tragedy for those who lost their homes, possessions and loved ones. And those we lost are still in our hearts today. The floods were followed then by Cyclone Yasi, and then by natural disasters in 2 of the countries with which we probably have the closest ties, the New Zealand earthquake and the earthquake, tsunami and radiation leaks in Japan. Their impact on our economy and the budget bottom line was among the very least of their terrible consequences, but it was not insignificant. nor was the lingering impact of the global downturn on our economy. As I moved around our country in recent months, I saw the devastating impact of that summer's natural disasters, the impact they had on communities. I also saw families and businesses from other corners of our economy were doing it tough. Retailers were struggling as cautious Australian consumers paid down debt. At the same time, many in the business community continued to find it difficult to access credit as lenders became more risk averse. It also became increasingly clear over the last 4 months of ERC discussions that revenue collections in the mining boom Mark II were not following the same pattern as in mining boom Mark I. Of course, one reason here was the renewed strength of the Australian dollar. This, of course, reflects the relative strength of our economy and the positive outlook. It is also one of the ways that a wider range of Australians benefit from the mining boom through cheaper imports. But it has also unfavourably affected some of our trade-exposed sectors, such as tourism, education and manufacturing, and having a bigger impact on the revenue than we previously realised. Capital gains tax receipts have been hit too, with Australian share prices still below where they were at the time of the 2008-9 budget. The mining industry accounts for an increasing share of profits, but the combination of the surge in mining investment and the accelerated depreciation provisions of the income tax law mean that that does not translate into revenue as it did in mining boom Mark I. These facts have wiped $130 billion off revenues between 2008-9 and 2012-13. But they have not diminished our appetite for iron fiscal discipline and targeted investments in the future. This is because, despite the short-term softness and revenue write-downs, the longer-term story that ran through our budget preparations and this budget is the story of mining boom Mark II in the Asian century. The speed and the scale of the changes we are witnessing in Asia are absolutely unprecedented. 20 years ago, China and India together accounted for less than one-tenth of world production. Today, that share has doubled, and by the end of this decade, it is expected to be over a quarter of world production. China and India will then account for more output than the United States and Japan combined. By then, it was apparent that Asia has not. By then, it will be apparent that Asia has not only become the world's biggest production zone, but also its biggest consumption zone. So concerned as we were by the overhang of the global financial crisis, the floods, cyclones and earthquakes, we knew that when we put the budget together, that our prospects were still bright and our economy would not be knocked off its growth path, its long-term growth path. Also, strong demand from Asia, we have seen a truly stunning rise in the prices of our commodity exports. Right now, our terms of trade are their highest sustained level in 140 years. The huge global demand for our resources is also driving an investment boom, the likes of which this country has never seen. New engineering construction will grow by more than half over the next 2 years.
What a load of shit.
Plus more development in iron and coal.
What happened to the pensioners? What happened to the bloody people that need some help? 10% GST, well, now we're going to get hit with this bloody gas or emissions tax, and everything's going to go up in price. This is bullshit, bloody economics, run by a bloody bullshit government, and I don't think the Liberals will do much better. Yeah, so who do you vote for at the next election? Maybe the One Nation Nationals Party. Catch you later.
In budget statement number 4, and what I want to stress to you today is that in many ways, the mining boom is just the first taste for us.
Avoca Gold Proprietary Limited. They've got a mining boom, but they've got a mining organisation that's very dirty at the moment. Laurie, man, Ryan, Roland. Yeah, it's so much money. Goodbye.